Thank you, Dee Dee.
Excellent. Okay, thank you so much. I will let you introduce yourself, but as everybody can see, it's going to be a fantastic talk. This is a great topic and I'm really excited by it. Thanks so much, Emma.
Thank you, Dee Dee. And hello and good morning, everyone. My name is Dr. Emma Woods. I'm a mythologist and a folklorist, and speaking to you today from Ngunnawal country in Canberra, Australia. I am a white female presenting human, although I must admit I was very tempted by the dragon costume in the avatar selection options for this presentation. I'm also the author of Bite Me, the vagina dentata myth, and I also run the Mythcrafts blog with my husband Shiva, who is out there in the audience. Today, I am here to talk to you about vagina dentata, otherwise known as toothed vaginas. These toothy terrors are a surprisingly common archetype of the sexually dangerous woman, despite the fact that they are a completely fictitious condition. I do also just want to pause and add a trigger warning here. There is quite a bit of material that deals with sexual violence towards women in this presentation, so we do really want to make that clear up front. These days, we often see vagina dentata in the horror sci-fi genre. The antagonists in two of the biggest movie franchises of this genre, Alien and Predator, are both inspired by the image of an embodied toothed vagina. Toothed vaginas also appear in anime and video games, and even inspired their own film in 2006, Teeth, a body horror rape revenge that also explores the impacts of purity culture on teenagers. Even Stephen King, one of the most prolific and popular horror writers of our time, invoked the vagina dentata when interviewed about his greatest sexual fear. He answered, "The vagina dentata, the vagina with teeth, a story where you were making love to a woman and it just slammed shut and cut your penis off." So by now, you might be asking yourself, why is this topic relevant to a conversation about inclusivity within narratives and the future of culture and storytelling? And that is a valid question. A quick bit of background about me. My PhD is in mythology from a depth psychological perspective. And while this archetype is certainly more Freudian than Jungian, my research explores not only why symbolic motifs resonate with us, but also how they then manifest in our culture and reality. When starting my research, I picked the vagina dentata as my symbolic case study because, on the surface, it just seems like a harmless yet surreal horror trope. Something to make us squirm in our seats at the cinema, or terrifying folklore swapped between sexually inexperienced youth. What I discovered through my research was how often this symbolic motif occurred globally throughout our history, and how often it can be concretely associated with misogynist attitudes, medical negligence, and sexual violence towards women. This is where the true terror in these toothy tales lies, and what I want to explore with you today. Hopefully, this talk becomes a great reminder about the power of storytelling and the need to be mindful and conscious about the stories we tell as we move forward into the future. To start, I want to go back to the idea of the psychological purpose of storytelling. Joseph Campbell is a great gateway drug for budding mythologists due to the accessibility of his material. So I wanted to quickly revisit his 4 functions of mythology from his book, the power of myth. The first function of myth is that it can provide us with a sense of awe, a way in which we can experience the world and its mysterious wonders. Myth provides both a lens through which we can view art, literature, and it acts as a source of inspiration which we can create from. The knowledge of myth can be applied to art, literature, and poetry as a mode of interpretation. And conversely, myth becomes the framework of cultural archetypes and symbols which can be used to convey meaning when we create art. Elements such as numbers, shapes, directions, and colours all have symbolic properties that we can miss the significance of if the base myths are unknown to us. The second function of myth is that it gives us a key to understanding the cosmological dimension. It orders the shape of the universe for us. Myth provides a way to understand the universe and the way in which it is ordered by individual cultures. It can tell us how and why the world was formed and how humans and animals came to be. Most importantly, myth explains the parts of the world we cannot see. The spiritual world, whether it is a giant turtle who carries the world on its back, or the unseen dimensions of heaven and hell. Myth gives us access to the parts of the universe we cannot see or experience through any other means. The third function is to support the social orders and morals that lie within a cultural structure. It relates the taboos and customs and expectations of behaviour within a society. Mythology can also be a way to define social roles by modelling both our family and relationship structures. On a larger scale, it provides a hierarchical framework for a society. Who fulfills what roles and who has what power. Myth can also be used to establish the origin and purpose of certain rituals and initiations, and it provides a way to infer good and bad dichotomies on characteristics, behaviours, and attributes. Myth can therefore define what behaviours are appropriate and which are not, and often forms the basis for written laws. And just a reminder here, mythology is not always used for good. When we talk about power, we mean religious, political, and social power and propaganda. Something which is often used to exclude, demonize, or oppress other groups or belief systems. Lastly, myth can provide us with a pedagogical framework from which we can begin to understand ourselves. It can be used to give psychological insight to a society or individual. It defines the belief structures and expectations that a person was raised with and lives within. We can learn a lot about a person and ourselves when we understand the framework of the ideas we were raised with. Myth teaches us where we come from. It teaches us about good and evil. It teaches us the behavioural norms that our society will expect from us. Without knowledge of the environments in which we were raised, it is very hard to understand our own or others' psychological development. So with this understanding of mythological function fresh in our minds, let's head back to our Toothy Terrors. Despite its popularity in current culture, many people do not realize vagina dentata often features in ancient global mythology, especially in human origin stories and from cultures that were disparate from each other at the time. If we take a quick look at just some, and this is by no means an exhaustive list, of vagina dentata tales from world mythology, you can start to see just how spread out they are. Starting in the Polynesian islands, we find the story involving the demigod Maui and Hainatopu, the guardian of the underworld. Wanting to achieve immortality, Maui concocts a plan, reasoning that he will defeat death if he crawls into the vagina of Hainatopu, a symbolic reversal of the birthing process. Unfortunately for Maui, as he begins his journey, some watching birds begin to loudly twitter and laugh at the sight of Maui desperately trying to force himself back inside her. The noise wakes Hainatopu, and she immediately shuts her legs in response to his violation. Inadvertently, she crushes Maui to death with the sharp obsidian teeth that line her vaginal walls. An example from the North American Numic tribes, who originated from where Nevada now lies, tells the story of Coyote and the first women, a mother and daughter with teeth in their vaginas. Wanting to copulate with the daughter, Coyote tries a variety of methods to remove the teeth, eventually tearing them out by shoving a sheep carcass up her skirt. Once the teeth are removed, the propagation of humans in the world begins to take place. The Huichol people of modern-day Mexico have a story about the magical deer spirit who inserted teeth into the vaginas of women to slow down and control human population. The ancestral grandmother, Nakor, reverses this plan, getting the Hulico cultural hero, Kayumari, to cover his penis with deer antlers and grind the teeth from the women so that human children can once again be born. The Nandi tribes in modern-day Kenya believe that the clitoris is a vestigial tooth left over from when women had teeth in their vaginas, a danger for men wanting intercourse. In India, we find the most comprehensive field study done on vagina dentata. Anthropologist Varya Elwin collected 24 different tales of vagina dentata from the central Indian region in the 1940s. Many of these narratives revolve around the idea of a rich man falling in love with a young girl with vagina dentata. He then has his servants forcibly remove the teeth so they can be married. In Russia, we find a tale of a bride forced to marry a man she finds repulsive. In a bid to prevent consummating her marriage, the young bride inserts the head of a pikefish inside her, scaring her husband away by convincing him that women have toothed vaginas. And lastly, we have Japan. where each year they have the Shinto Kanemaru Matsuri Festival, a celebration of a story of a blacksmith who forged a steel phallus to break the teeth of a demon who was possessing a young woman's vagina. On the first Sunday in April, giant penises are paraded down the street while onlookers munch on phallic-shaped treats as an homage to this tale. So now that we have established that the vagina dentata is fairly prolific across the globe, notably appears in many of the foundational stories of multiple cultures, and is often associated with universal themes like birth and death. If we collate the body of work as a whole, some basic story arcs begin to appear throughout the majority of the works. Firstly, we start with a woman who has teeth in her vagina. Secondly, we have a male hero that comes and saves the day by removing the teeth. Act 3 is generally where the woman is now happily joined with the hero, gratefully indebted to him for saving her, of course. These stories are relayed in a positive light. The women are cured, hurrah! Humans can now join together happily and create children. These vagina dentata stories are presented as tales of sexual unity. Now, despite this being the generally agreed story arc by most academics, when we look at the current interpretations, they seem to have a fairly misogynist lens applied, and they focus purely on the impact to the male. Stith Thompson's Motif Index of Folk Literature describes this tale type as a woman that kills her husbands with her toothed vagina. It is worth noting here that the act of killing is an active action of the female. It is the woman who is at fault. This idea gets demonstratively worse as we look at Brewer's Dictionary of Phrase and Fable, who call vagina dentata an image of dangerously predatory female sexuality that crops up in folklore and fantasy. Again, it is the woman who is not only at fault here, but is now considered dangerous and predatory. Wolfgang Lederer's fear of women interpretation is even worse, calling them myths of male-devouring femme fatales, suggesting that the female is now actively hunting the menfolk. In these interpretations, the idea of unity agreed upon in the story arc analysis has been completely discarded, leaving only the dangerous element of female sexuality behind. But if we consider these stories from a feminist lens and with a female protagonist, they start to tell a much more sinister story when we add in some of the following details. Most of the time, the woman is completely unaware of the teeth's existence and is just as surprised as the man when they are attacked and dismembered. It is also worth noting that in almost all the tales, the woman is not the one who initiates the sexual contact, and in the majority of cases, she is not a willing participant in the sexual activity. This may be either through outright rape or, alternatively, not having any right to the bodily autonomy to say no to the situation. When we consider how the male removes the teeth, it is also telling. The most common objects used to break and bludgeon them are either sharpened sticks or stones. Even with the trigger warning, I have not included any examples, as the descriptions of the removal is often bloody and grisly, and make it clear that the woman experiences a great deal of pain. Yet by the conclusion, we are expected to celebrate that the woman is now cured and, unbelievably, that she was happy in her relationship. This is an incredibly unrealistic likelihood, especially when we consider that this man first forced himself upon her and then committed a secondary, shocking act of violence while removing the teeth. This expectation invokes a sense of the horrifically widespread multicultural practice of women marrying women to their rapists. So going back to the start of this presentation and connecting with the idea that myths are teaching apparatuses designed to help order our world and set social norms, then we have to ask, what are these stories really teaching us about the world? Firstly, they teach women are inherently sexually dangerous and need to be controlled. The vagina becomes a place of hidden terrors that lurk beneath. It also teaches that men are entitled to women's bodies, that if a man desires a woman, he should be able to have her. It also teaches that women need to be sexually subdued by any means necessary. Here, holding down a woman and brutalizing her is okay if it maintains the status quo and makes her safe for men. Violence against women is sanctioned and justified by stories of the vagina dentata. Thirdly, it teaches that men are naturally dominant, that for men and women to live together, women need to be submissive. It also suggests males control procreation, that before the hero broke useless, it was only through men modifying their bodies that women can become passive vessels for their male seed to grow. Now, as I said, if these are the things that these stories teach in culture, and stories create culture, we should be able to see them manifest. One of the most extreme examples of an attempt to paint women as dangerous and to exert control over women in the Western world is played out in the witchcraft trials of the Middle Ages. Another arena in which vagina dentata played a small but significant role. According to journalist Margot Adler in her book Drawing Down the Moon, this moral panic that gripped much of Europe saw estimates of 40 to 50,000 women accused and executed for their crimes. One of the many crimes these women were accused of was the ability to grow teeth within their vaginas. And while the exact number of girls and women worldwide who have undergone female genital mutilation remains unknown, according to UNICEF, at least 200 million girls and women across 30 countries have been subjected to this practice. For many tribes, this practice stems from the mythic idea that the clitoris is a vestigial tooth left over from when women had teeth in their vagina. It justifies the practice as the clitoris has to be removed to both protect men from danger and save women from their natural state of uncontrollable and animalistic sexual urges. There have also been a number of instances of men using objects to penetrate women before rape or paid sex to check for teeth. There were a number of reports of this type of behaviour from returning American soldiers from the Vietnam War, scared of Viet Cong prostitutes that were rumoured to replicate vagina dentata by inserting razor blades inside. Likewise, the development of anti-rape devices such as Rapex, a device with teeth barbs inside, inspired directly by vagina dentata, has again instilled the fear of booby-trapped vaginas. Vagina dentata stories also perpetuate the idea of women's sexuality needing to be controlled and regulated by men. Many current religions still participate in regulating women's sexuality through shame-based ideology and the idea of male ownership. From the ancient Greeks came the medical theory of the wandering womb, which existed well into the 17th century. This theory suggested that the womb was autonomous, and if women did not constantly weigh it down with children, it would float around her body, munching on her internal organs. One of the identifying symptoms? Hysteria. In the 19th century Europe, clitoridectomy became a standard operation for women that were deemed to be nymphomaniacs, but was also expanded into a cure-all in some circles. When we see the anti-abortion laws and return to purity culture sweeping across supposedly civilized nations such as the USA, we can see how this fear of female sexuality and the insistence that it is dangerous still pervades many contemporary Western cultures. I want to restate that the purpose of this research is really to highlight how a seemingly simple and surreal archetype can manifest through our culture in so many negative ways. Women have suffered and still suffer under the negative influences that this archetype has. While there has been some feminist reclamation in the vagina dentata through rape revenge stories, I'm not sure that is the answer. After all, women must be sexually penetrated first to enact revenge in those scenarios. The vagina dentata archetype and others like it will never cease to exist. So we are better off unveiling its purpose and educating people on how it has impacted our society. The power of storytelling is something we need to be mindful of and educate ourselves and others about. This archetype has flourished in patriarchal societies, and believing that female sexuality is dangerous and needs to be controlled has helped create the acceptance of associated behaviour and legal and social regulation of women. We must also remember that while folklore can be fun and fascinating, it also fills the gaps of knowledge. The fact that sex education is still a contentious issue in most cultures helps allow fearful folklore like the vagina dentata to flourish and take root. As we move forward into the future, we need to be mindful of the impacts of storytelling and how stories resonate and reflect our culture and values. I called my book Bite Me to invoke this idea of contemptuous dismissal and a rejection of these shame-based ideologies. We need to find ways to celebrate the beauty of female power and sexuality. I wanted to end my presentation with this fabulous artwork from Chloe Davis. I met Chloe on Twitter after she reached out to me to let me know that she had read my book as this had been a topic of interest for her, and that she'd created art on the subject. Her handle is up on the slides if you do want to check her out. But she did provide me an artist's statement to read. My work explores healing through the metaphor of a portal, a transitional, liminal space between emotional or physical realities. I represent the portal as a vaginal, womb-like mandala image, as the vagina is the ultimate portal, which brings life into this world. This ultimate portal is a cosmic symbol of rebirth. My art constructs a visual mythology narrative of healing portals, archetype guardians, and transmuting shields that discuss healing and trauma in a feminist, esoteric way by recontextualizing the ancient mythological symbol of the vagina dentata rooted in patriarchy and rape culture. I am transforming the vagina dentata into a healing, empowering symbol that rejects the docile body and empowers women and survivors of trauma to reclaim their autonomy and selves. The vagina dentata is a metaphor for healing and becomes a portal, a transitional liminal space between dimensions and emotional or physical realities. I wanted to thank Chloe for letting me use her art and thought this was a perfect example of how we can find ways to collaborate in community and find inspiration in retelling and reimagining symbolic archetypes in more positive and beautiful ways as we move forward into our cultural future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Emma. That was absolutely amazing. What a journey through the mythology there. I was expecting it to be really interesting, but I feel a bit blown away by that. It's certainly a lot to think about, I think, for us all and stuff to reflect on later. Thank you so much. Were you happy to take questions from the floor, or did you want to take some that had been sent over?
I'm happy to take them from the floor.
Okay, fabulous.
Just don't make them too hard.
Does anyone have a question that they would like to ask, or any comments? To be honest, I think it's a lot to take in, and it's such an impactful topic. I think it's something that it takes a minute to kind of let it sit with you. I do have a question then, if nobody else wants to jump in. Thinking about this talk coming up, I remember watching many years ago the Vagina Monologues, and that is where it was a stage show where a woman took the stage and told stories that she collected from women around the country, maybe the world, about their vaginas and how they felt about them and how they related to them. And it was interesting, the range of responses that women had to the topic. And I was just wondering, Emma, how do you find women respond when you give talks about this, or when you engage them in conversation? What are their reactions?
So they do vary. I think a lot of them are really surprised to see just how much something so bizarre really can impact us as a society. One of the things that I get a lot of, though, is that, you know, when I wrote my book, I tried to be very I tried not to be angry, which was quite hard after spending 2 years researching this. But I figured that being angry doesn't help facilitate discussion. And I wanted people to understand this and to make it a bit more accessible. I didn't want people to just feel like they were being attacked when they were reading it. And I really wanted it to be that way. And I do get a lot of criticism sometimes, just that I didn't get angry enough. And that people really love that kind of rape revenge idea. But I just don't think that that's a productive way to take this. And there's also those sort of underlying issues of, is it really empowering if the woman has to be raped first to then really respond to that? So, I find that a little bit troubling. It has been interesting. It certainly impacted me in other ways. I found that a lot of workplaces don't particularly like my book. So, it has impacted my social life that way. But I do think it's a really important, and I also feel like it's something that it does appeal to people because it is kind of a little bit out of the box.
Absolutely. I'm so pleased that you were able to speak about this today. It's something that I don't think a lot of people are aware of, and just the social impact, to hear about that for today's theme, it's been amazing. Thank you so much. It's amazing. And folks, do get the book. It is available in bookshops. It's available online. So do go and grab a copy of that. Thank you so much, Emma.